Guten Abend, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. 2 Hinweise. Wir haben aus dem letzten Jahr noch Plakate, Texte von Thomas Brasch und Toni Morrison, die liegen hier aus, jeweils auf den Garderoben. Wer 2, 3 mitnehmen will oder 4, kann das gern tun. Zweitens, wir haben einen großen Büchertisch, den Sie wahrscheinlich schon gesehen haben. Da gibt es auch nicht nur Bücher von Margaret Atwood, sondern auch von Claudia Rankine. Die können dort gekauft werden. Und ja, jetzt begrüßen Sie bitte Claudia Rankine und Margaret Atwood.
Good evening. It is such a pleasure to be here and to be here with an institution. I'm actually sitting next to a living institution. Hello, Margaret.
Hello, Claudia.
We just determined that Margaret could be my mother.
I could, yes, it's true.
Except not. I mean, just as a matter of fact.
A matter of timing, yes.
And continents and all kinds of things. So I am in the privileged position of being a fellow at the American Academy this fall, and that puts me in Wannsee, and I have been walking around lakes. And as I've been walking around these lakes, I have these headphones, and I have been listening to Burning Questions, your latest, which I think will arrive here in
Next year.
Next year.
Yeah, so it's a book of essays from 2004 to sort of now-ish.
And what is fantastic about it, and I encourage you to get it, is that in one way or another, in essay after essay, you build your entire, not up to 2004, writing life, a kind of poetics. You get a sense of the books you've reviewed, the places you've been, the people you've seen. So for me, it's I learned lots of things, and I thought, maybe we could start talking about The Handmaid's Tale.
Yes, which I began writing here in Berlin in 1984 on a German typewriter, which I rented. And that was a little hard because the letters are in different places, but happily, I don't touch type. So if I had touch typed, it would have been worse, you know.
I mean, sometimes our limits help us, yes?
Sometimes it's a plus. Yes,
sometimes
it's a plus. So maybe it was good I took home economics in the 1950s instead of secretarial sciences. What do you think?
I say God bless you.
If you ever have trouble with your zippers, I know how to fix that.
Well, I know who to call. But one of the things I learned while listening to the many voices reading the essays was that when the book arrived, the reviews were various. Mary McCarthy in the New York Times called it implausible, uninventive, which I think she was wrong.
Well, it's true that it wasn't inventive because I didn't put anything into it that had not happened sometime, someplace, somewhere.
There you go.
So, and why did I do that? Because somebody said on on Twitter recently, how does Margaret Atwood come up with this weird shit? And I said, it's not me that comes up with this weird shit, it's the human race. Yeah.
It's, yeah, because you are a descendant of...
American Puritans.
Yes.
Yes. There's good and there's bad.
And
there's plus and minus about that.
And so the, witches were burned or hanged.
Hanged in the States,
Right.
burned here.
And so all of that
Oh, it's interesting.
finds its way into the architecture of the book. But I would love for you to tell us about the sort of because you talk about this in the essay, how wounded, should I use the word wounded, you felt by that New York Times review.
Well,
and
because
the
it was
different-
Mary McCarthy. You know, I used to read her books in the bathtub.
Which, sacred place, yes.
Oh, yes, that's what I think. So we had a reviewer in Canada who said that if he really liked a book, and he read them all in the bathtub, if he liked it, the book didn't get wet.
And
Yeah, I
yeah.
respected her, and she blew me off. But anyway.
But you
that's
found
what happened.
out that she had a stroke.
She had had a stroke, but you couldn't rudely say that. That would have been quite rude.
So her something was impaired.
I'm not sure. I think she was voicing an opinion that was held. So the reactions to the book were varied. So in England, where they had a religious civil war already, and they had Oliver Cromwell, and they'd had Puritans, and whatever other odd things that they were going to do, it wouldn't have been that exactly. So they said, jolly good tale.
Tail. Right.
Yes, jolly good yarn.
Mm-hmm.
Canada, a nervous place. We're always very nervous. Why? North of us we have Russia, south of us we have the United States. You'd be nervous too. Of course, you are nervous. You're Germany.
And if you're not, you should be. Yeah.
And if you're not, you should be. So they said, could it happen here? They said, in the United States, it's split. Some had the Mary McCarthy view, no, it couldn't happen here. Hey, we're the United States, beacon of liberty, land of democracy. We will not ever do such a thing. And the other reaction, which was on the West Coast largely, was, how much time do we have? In Europe, because it was still the Cold War, Berlin was still encircled by the wall, okay, and every Sunday they made sonic booms in the East just to remind you that they were there. They didn't want to see the United States as ever being a possible totalitarianism because it was the
Model.
city upon a hill, a light to all nations. That is a quote from the 17th century, not just George W. Bush. So they didn't want to believe it. However, as time has told, that was possibly premature.
Well, clearly. How should I put this? You have had, I'm going to say, the fortunate reality of seeing the book not only become part of our lives globally, but also with different interpretations, open out to different populations, open out to different readings, become inclusive historically. How much input did you have? I'm thinking a little bit about the television show and other things, but how much input do you have in those redoings of the Handmaid's Tale?
Yes. Here's the story of how it became a television show.
I'm ready.
It's a slightly long story.
Take it.
Okay. So we made a film which came out in 1989
Oh, that's right. With
Volker Schlorndorff,
who I had dinner with.
who you had dinner with, and
yeah.
I've seen him recently too.
Yeah.
And it starred Natasha Richardson and Faye Weldon, and Harold Pinter wrote the screenplay, and we launched it here. We launched it in 1989 as the wall was coming down. I bought some pieces of it. Colored ones were more expensive than plain ones. And I think they went out at night and colored more of it. Anyway, I was there right then. And we did it first in West Berlin, and the conversation was aesthetic. So the direction, the sets, the acting, those things you talk about with movies. And then we went across and did it in the East. And this was the first time that such a thing had been possible since, let us say, the 1940s. And the reaction was very different. The reaction of the people was, this was our life. They didn't mean the outfits. Mm-hmm. They were not wearing these outfits. What they meant was you didn't ever know who you were talking to. You didn't know who you could trust. So that's what they meant, and it was very striking. So then the film got sold to a distributor. The distributor then went bankrupt. The assets of the distributor, including the Handmaid's Tale contract, were sold off, and the contract went into the mountain with Gollum and was lost to view because, hand on heart, nobody knew where it was. So people came over the years and said, could we make a television thing out of Handmaid's Tale, because the rights were in that contract. And I had to say, I don't know who has the rights. I don't know where they are.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
The ring of power has been lost from view. So then one day, MGM was opening drawers, and in one of the drawers, what should they find but
The contract.
Yes, they found it. And then they decided to, by this time we had streamed television series. And streamed television series have been a great boon to longer novels. So once upon a time, series television just meant Dallas, or it meant daytime soap. And that's why I thought when we first made this contract, nobody is ever going to do this. This is not Dallas. It's not a daytime soap. It won't happen. But now we had streamed series. So they teamed up with Hulu, who at that time was a purveyor of movies that nobody else wanted. How can I say that?
Wanted to show.
They were fairly low down on the totem pole of streamers. So they took a chance, and they went all in. The showrunner, his name is Bruce Miller, and when we were doing the initial publicity, he would say, hey, I'm Bruce Miller, I'm the showrunner of The Handmaid's Tale, and I've got one penis too many. But but I've hired a lot of women. And he did. He hired a lot of women. And he had fallen in love with this book when he was 19 and had vowed to make it into a show when he was grown up. And it often happens this way, that you fall in love with something when you're young, and then when you have the capability, you are able to do it. So he did that, and he got the job because he was so immersed in it. He knew everything about it, and he knew how he would do it, and he hired a stellar cast. So, do I have any power? No. Do I have influence? Some. Do I always get my way? No. Do I get my way some of the time? Yes. Like that.
And it turns out it was reality TV, so.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
So if I had a choice, so the good fairy with the wand comes and says, so you have two choices. Your show can be a flop, and the United States will remain a liberal democracy. Or,
yeah.
Or Trump will get elected. So my agent in the state said, I will try to imitate the accent, which is the Detroit accent. I hate to say this, but you are the only person who has benefited from the election of Donald Trump. And then, unfortunately, that was kind of true. I don't think I was the only person. I think a lot of his pals did.
Oh, yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
I'm the only person that agent knew that did.
Well, perhaps the only reality television Hulu sponsored narrative. I wanted to talk a little bit about storytelling, because I wrote down this little quote I want to read to you. It's by one of my fellows at the Academy, Jackie Murray, and she wrote an article on race and sexuality. She's a Greek scholar. But she said, storytelling offers an efficient soft power mechanism for reproducing dominant narratives.
That's one of the things it does, but not the only thing it does.
So why don't you tell us?
The other things it does.
The other things it does.
Okay, so she's a classicist?
Mm-hmm. She's a classicist, which makes sense in terms of...
Sometimes it does. So I went to Epidaurus, which has this amazing Greek theater, which still has excellent acoustics. And near it there was a healing center. One of the theories about Greek drama was that it was whatever else it was a healing mechanism. So reenacting trauma allows people to see and deal with trauma. And I sometimes work with an outfit called Theater of War, which puts on ancient Greek drama to specific groups of people who have been involved in trauma. I think they started with vets, and they started with Ajax, which is written by Sophocles, who was a war veteran. And it's a pretty good description of PSTD. So that's another thing that storytelling can do. People used to say, boo on fairy tales, because they're about frilly pink princesses. But that was in the age of Disneyfication. It was when Disney had got hold of them. I read the originals, the Grimm's version, which actually have a lot of active female protagonists. Some frilly princesses, granted, but these other characters who Disney wasn't that interested in. So I think it can go a number of different ways, and you also have to always realize who is telling the story, to whom are they telling it. So in oral storytelling tradition of the Haida, for instance, the stories were always told in threes, and they were told on specific occasions. And they were told to specific people, and they were making a point.
But you say, I liked something you said in the book, which in Burning Questions, when you talk about how if you read a book when you're in high school, it stays with you. And I feel that often the books that we're given to read in high school, we're given them because they perform these dominant narratives.
Well, I can tell you why we were given the books we were given in high school, because I'm older than you, Claudia. And this was
All right, go ahead.
This was the 50s. We were given those books, which were 19th century English novels, because they didn't have sex in them. There was sex in them, but
well,
it
that's
was
also performing
off
a
the page.
narrative. It's
Oh, they just
performing
didn't want to embarrass everybody. Yeah, with sex in the books.
But I think that one of the staying powers of all your books is that at the core is both the critique of a dominant narrative and the reinstatement of it, so that it can be seen for what it is.
So laying it out.
Yeah. And
Yeah, well, pushing it as far as it goes. But for instance, The Handmaid's Tale, the germ of it was a friend of mine who was a feminist in Canada who said, "Do you know what they say they want to do?" This would be about 1981, just after Ronald Reagan got elected. This evangelical right wing is now saying they want women back in the home. So being a practical person, I thought, well, how do they intend to get them there?
Exactly.
What's their method? And you just need to roll back about, 100 years in that case. And that's what it was like, unless you were quite poor and had to have a job. But middle-class women, that's where they were supposed to be, and it was considered not exactly bad taste, but not done to have a job.
So was it written out of anxiety? Is that for yourself in a way?
I think it was written, well, not for me, I'm Canadian.
All right.
We did things differently.
But you were in Alabama.
Wasn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That was pretty fascinating. I finished the book actually in Alabama.
Yeah.
And why did we do that? You are going to laugh.
Go on.
We were bird watchers.
Ah.
So we got this invitation, and I said, "Are we going to go to Alabama?" And Graham said, "Well, we've never seen the
What kind of bird was it?
the large, tasty, slow-moving, and rare limpkin." And that's why it was rare. It was large, tasty, and slow-moving.
And so you finished, and that's where you finished the book. Which
I
is
finished the book right there,
in a
and I
very
was so
apt
excited
place.
because they had just invented fax machines. So I was able to fax remember what I said about not being able to type. I sent my badly typed, scribbled on messy manuscript pages to a typist who was able to read my messy, indecipherable handwriting and make beautiful pages. So that's what I was doing, among other things.
Okay.
I was also teaching a course called Southern Ontario Gothic about my province of Ontario and teaching people like Alice Munro and Robertson Davies, who were writing about these strange Southern Ontario towns. And that was very popular with the students because they recognized a lot of the things in it, including the feuds and the claustrophobia.
Yeah. Would you get up for a minute? Just stand up.
You want to see how short I am?
I want to see how you're dressed. I think this is lovely. I like the colors. I like the...
I'm glad you approve.
Yeah, well, I was surprised.
And I like how you're dressed, too.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, it's somewhat
I was-
chicer than mine, but
I was
never mind.
surprised with how much attention, close God, in your books and also in your critical thought. And I loved when you said that when you were reading, you were interested in how people were dressed and whether or not it was in time with the time of the book, and if the person was wearing an incorrect bustle for the time of the time.
Oh, yeah, that's important. People will call you out on that. Yeah, it was particularly important in writing Alias Grace because I had to do a lot of research on that. They didn't actually, it wasn't immediately apparent what female prisoners in the Kingston Penitentiary were wearing, but we did find out. Well, I think it's always been very important to people. If you go back to the Code of Hammurabi, which is of 4000 BC, there's stuff about who can wear what. And you would be interested to know that only aristocratic women were allowed to wear veils. And if you were caught wearing a veil and you weren't one of those women, it was the death penalty. Woo.
Ooh.
Yeah, right, killed for not wearing a veil, imagine that. So it has always been important, I think, in every human society that we know anything about. We won't necessarily say just clothing, but bodily decoration, like what you put on your body. Hair has always been important. Jewelry, or stuff you wear around your neck, other things like that. And they used to be pretty potent signifiers. So in medieval, early Renaissance times, they had sumptuary laws that only certain people, only members of the aristocracy were allowed to wear certain kinds of fur, right? So those were laws. Weird, eh?
The unbeauty essay. I was thinking about this. Do you think that part of the interest in beauty, in clothes, etc., is tied to the time, that 80s period, the rise of feminism coming out of the 70s and 80s? Is it a kind of soft way of critiquing?
So it's come in waves.
Yeah.
So we have the 40s when everything was very sturdy. Like sturdy, you didn't want the cloth to wear out. It was kind of square, it was boxy. And it was durable, and the colors were dark, so they didn't get dirty so easily. Then you have 1950. You weren't born.
I wasn't born. This is
You weren't born, but never mind, I was.
You've got
And
it
we
covered.
Yeah, we got it covered. So we have Dior's new look, and that was very fluffy. So it was when the skirt shaped like this came out. There was a lot of tulle, there were a lot of pastel colors, there were these pointy little shoes, there were these strapless evening gowns that came in, a challenge to some, but they were wired, like they were self-standing. You didn't.
Yeah, you didn't have to do much.
Yeah, there's some very funny stories about that, but I won't go into them. They're quite funny.
Why not?
Well,
If they don't include you, never mind.
they don't include me. I never went for it. I always had spaghetti straps. I wasn't going to take the chance, Claudia. So then you have that fluffiness, and everybody was saying how great this was, but that coincided with women must go back into the house to make room for men to have jobs. And that was a concerted, deliberate campaign. Then you get end of 60s second wave feminism, and that's when you get a big emphasis on overalls. We're not going to do this fluffy thing anymore. And I point out to you that the birth control pill came in about 1966, followed rapidly by the miniskirt. And
tights. you say.
tights arrived, and the miniskirt would not have happened without them,
The tights,
for reasons that I will not go into.
But that
that's
we
what
can
happened.
imagine.
You can imagine, yeah. So then you have this very sort of, and then you get the power suits. You get the pantsuits. So this is a reaction to the fluffiness. And then you get the 80s, which I've kind of repressed, fashion-wise. I had a horrible time during early miniskirt because it was twiggy. And for twiggy, you had to have really straight hair. That was a challenge. So I didn't actually ever iron my hair, but I did straighten it. And what happened then, Claudia? A lot of it broke off. So then I had these little strands of straight hair like this, and then I had curly hair coming in underneath. So then, but then we had something, right after that, we had something called the ethnic look. The ethnic look was made for me. Yeah, I was fine with the ethnic look.
But
So it goes in waves. So the 80s, I would say, was going to be a reaction against this kind of sturdy power suit 70s. And I forget what happened in the 90s.
But I like that you include these things not in and of themselves, but as a way of tracking also control. That they
Which part of the body is being controlled.
Yeah.
And it has changed from culture to culture from time to time, and which part of the body is considered sexy. So in the 19th century, it was ankles. Ankles, just telling you that.
In case it comes back.
Japan, late 19th century, it was the back of the neck was considered very sexy. But it has moved around. Anyway, I like to keep an eye on it. It's not very important to me anymore, but I like to keep an eye on what they're pushing, because there's always a look, and you have to keep having a different look, because otherwise people wouldn't buy new things, would they?
But that's capitalism is capitalism, but I think in your case it's also interesting to track the ways in which it's tied to absolute power, or the women's bodies as a thing to be controlled.
As display, or as display
Or
objects.
as to display. Yeah. I was at the Penn fundraising event this year, and you were there virtually with a copy. It was a flame-proof copy of The Handmaid's Tale, or Testament. Was it Testament?
No, it was The Handmaid's Tale.
It was The Handmaid's Tale. And so what do this...
With a flamethrower.
With the flamethrower,
Yeah.
with holding the actual flamethrower.
That was a real flamethrower, and those were real flames.
And the book did not burn, which was great.
They had to try 5 times to get a book that actually would not burn.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Well, I got the one that didn't burn, but they had tried some other prototypes, which unfortunately caught fire.
Oh. Which, is probably more true to what's going on in the States right now.
Book burning.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that have they actually set fire to anything yet?
They've talked about burning them. I haven't seen them.
They've disappeared, a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. So they've gotten pulled from libraries and put in a warehouse while we consider. And then they have just vanished. But I'm here to tell you that it sells more copies if you can make it known that this book has been banned, because people are very interested to see what it is they're not allowed to see.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But it's still disturbing that it's a thing. You have said that all writing is a form of transmitting human voice.
No question.
Yes. And first, I have we are going to have to move to audience questions, but I wanted to ask you, well, you're older,
No. No, how can you say that?
What are you working on now?
What I am working on now, we just did the page proofing of a collection of stories called Old Babes in the Wood, which is a story that was in the New Yorker, but this is a whole collection of stories, which includes another story that we did as an Amazon short fiction called My Evil Mother.
Good. So we have a book of essays, we have the poems, we have the short stories. Would you embark on another, I would call epic novel, like you have in the past?
I never tell.
You never tell.
I never tell. And one of the reasons I never tell is that if I told, number one, I might not do it, and then people would endlessly say, well, you said you were going to do blah, blah, and you didn't do it. Why?
Right.
So to avoid that, but also, if I told ever my publishers what I was actually working on, they would probably say, are you out of your mind? So if I had said, well, I'm working on this novel called The Handmaid's Tale, in which the United States is a theocratic white supremacy totalitarianism, they would have said, are you out of your mind?
Right.
So I just like to surprise them.
So in a way, you are also double plus on free. I love that phrase, double plus on free.
Yes, I'm double plus secretive. Yeah,
Double plus
that's it.
secretive. You, I'm going to turn to the audience, but the last thing, you tell a story in one of the essays about the log king and the stork king, and I wondered if you would tell the audience that story.
The what?
The log king?
Oh, the log king and the stork king.
Yes.
Oh, right, it's an old fable. I think it's Aesop, not sure, but quite old. So the frogs complain to the gods that they don't have a king. They want a king, and they croak and they croak and they make a lot of noise. And the gods say, well, the frogs want a king, well, we'll give them this log. And the log floats around in the pond, and at first the frogs are quite happy that they have a king, but the king doesn't do anything, it just floats around in the pond. So then they complain to the gods, and they say, our king isn't doing anything, we want a more active king. And so the gods get quite annoyed with this, and they send down a stork to be the king, and it eats up all the frogs.
I found that amusing thinking about...
Don't find it too amusing.
I found it amusing. You're Canadian. The Canadians are the destination of all fanciful, magical thinking Americans who think they can escape.
Well, this has certainly changed, because Canada used to be that boring place that nobody ever thought about.
Now?
You know.
And now real estate in Canada.
Well, yeah. We're not immune from anything, and nobody is. So there is no magic place where it can't happen here. And that's why vigilance is, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, as you perfectly well know.
And and I'm sure you were disturbed by what happened with Salman Rushdie.
I was very disturbed by what happened with Salman Rushdie. And as you know, I did a piece about it. And we just did an event in New York with PEN America, which centered around that. And we're about to do an event in Canada on September 27th, which will also center around that. And I think it's made a few people pop awake, actually quite a few people pop awake, and look with new eyes on freedom of expression.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you for all the work, both the books, but also putting yourself on the line in these really important times.
You know, Claudia, I don't have a job.
Well, we're lucky. So now we're going to turn to the audience, and I was charged with making sure that the people in the balconies are seen and heard. I think the mics are there mics somewhere?
I think if we had the lights up a bit, we would know these things.
We could see. Or maybe you just stand up and talk loudly. Oh, you do have mic. Oh, there's a person.
Are there roving mics?
Yeah.
There's roving mics.
I know. I think I've been given a trick job. We're going to put lights in your eyes so you cannot see. And then I want you to find the people who want to talk.
Don't be shy. If I don't like your question, I'll just rearrange it.
Hello? Wait. Okay. Hi, I have a question over here. Yeah, I'm really curious. I have heard a lot. I think I'm an American, and I think in reception of The Handmaid's Tale or in conversations around it, there's a sense of like this very dark tale is coming true in this like. We are all feeling this sense of obviously like looming darkness and then darkness happening and darkness continuing. And so I'm really curious from your perspective if you consider yourself a pessimist or an optimist or what?
Or something in between.
Yeah, and kind of what...
A bird watcher?
That's optimistic
like
now.
What you're hopeful about, and also, you said, I think, yeah, just we need to be careful, we need to watch out, and I just wonder about that that balance or that exchange for you, because it feels like a lot of darkness.
Don't
even
worry.
the show does too.
Okay, I've got this.
Sit down.
I get it. Yeah, so I did write a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale called The Testaments, and although it isn't the end, or even the beginning of the end is the end of the beginning, because one of my inspirations is George Orwell, who traumatized me when I was 12. Traumatized me even earlier because I thought Animal Farm was going to be like a cute animal story. I didn't know anything about Trotsky or the Soviet Union or anything. I just thought it was about pigs and horses. And I was just ruined by that horse. Just destroyed me. Anyway, 1984, people always spoke of it as being a very pessimistic book. And the main story does end very pessimistically, essentially with a Stalin show trial kind of scenario, brainwashing, and we know Winston Smith is going to get shot in the back of the head. But then there's a coda, and the coda is an essay on Newspeak written in standard English in the past tense. And that tells us that 1984 world is over. So it did not succeed. And similarly with The Handmaid's Tale, I put a historical note which takes place 250 years in the future. And they're speaking of this Gilead regime in the past tense. So when the past is over, it becomes either a theme park And I did put a theme park at the end of the Testaments, but they said, you can't do this. I know it's funny, but you can't do you cannot do this. So that tells us that that world ended. It doesn't tell us that a perfect world replaced it, but it did tell us that what has succeeded it is not that, and at least it's better enough so that that can be discussed, which I think is always an improvement. I don't think there ever is any perfect. There's never any perfect. There's better and worse, but there's never perfect because we're human beings, and I'm here to share this with you. Don't be shocked. Human beings are not perfect. I've never met one yet. And that's also because we all have different ideas of what perfect is anyway.
Well, but also the idea that all writing is human voice, to me, is the optimism.
Yes, it means the voice can, the written word is time traveling.
Exactly, and you write in the Kafka essay about the fact that he was writing about writing, and that the writing is the continuation of the human voice.
For sure, but it's also the reading that is the continuation of the human voice, because the book is inert. It's just like a musical score. It's black marks on a page until somebody is reading it. And every reading is going to be different because every reader is different. So you get many playings of the tune, but each playing of the tune is going to be unique. So I find that pretty hopeful.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Next question. This is my new job. There's one, there's one up in the balcony, yes.
Hello. Hi, I'm Srishti. I am a young journalist from India, and pleased to meet you. You spoke about Salman Rushdie and freedom of speech. My question is about that. In India specifically, and also a lot of third world countries with social media, free speech is curtailed like anything. For instance, I'm feeling nervous asking these questions because I know in my home country I can be again questioned for asking these questions. For instance, I was terminated from my job just because of a tweet. Salman Rushdie's book was first banned in India before being banned by other countries. So one question that I really want to ask you is that how do you see that young writers should write or be free in the speech in such situations when even the established writers are not so free? And what can be done for them, especially because situation is very difficult. My speech right now, I'm not able to speak well because I'm really nervous about it, because I know the situation is not good with respect to freedom of speech.
Well, that is why, yeah. So when people started first talking about freedom of expression, that was against a long background of censorship, and different things were censored in different places in different eras. For instance, you may wonder why there are no religious swear words in Shakespeare. There's a lot of other swear words, he got quite inventive, but there are no religious ones because that was censored at the time. Why was it censored? It was such a hot button thing because there were religious currents going on in his age. So there have always been areas from one society to another place where there were things that got you in trouble if you said them. And because I'm really old,
I agree. I'm joking.
You're supposed to say, no, you're not. Yes, I am. No, you're not.
Well,
yes.
I didn't want to say the expected.
You didn't want to contradict me. Yes, you shouldn't contradict older people.
Exactly.
So I remember when the bad words that you couldn't say were four-letter sex words. So those were the things you couldn't print.
You mean like fuck or?
No, stop that. Yes, exactly like that.
All right.
So the things that were censored were Ulysses and Lady Chatterley's lover. But it was bandied about with the greatest abandon in comic books and everything all over the place. Words that we would not use today because they are racial slurs. So that has flipped. The word that you just said is quite commonly used. And the words that I am not mentioning are not mentioned anymore. Is this good or bad? Maybe we should suppress the word that you just said again so that people would be more inventive about their swearing.
But also,
what do you think?
I also am interested in this notion of social media having even a little bit of privacy. I think one of the things we're learning is that social media is being monitored, and it's when you are on social media, you are public facing. And
It's publication, like
Yeah.
any other publication.
like any other publication, and so we can't be surprised when the pushback happens.
You can't be surprised when the pushback happens. But I think we also have to make a distinction between speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
So it really has to be truth, and it really has to be power, and just hate speech and yelling at people. So these are topics that people are conversing about quite a lot. And of course, Penn is very interested in this because on the one hand, we want artists to be free to express their art.
But
on the
what
other
you're
hand,
there's
yeah,
never been freedom.
there's never been total freedom.
Yeah.
There's never been total freedom, but the goalposts change
Change.
all the time. So what I'm remembering right now is Gustave Flaubert, whose Madame Bovary was put on trial. Was it put on trial for blasphemy? I kind of think immorality, and he defended it rather humiliatingly by saying, no, it wasn't immoral because Madame Bovary, although she did all these sexual things, died a horrible death. So therefore it wasn't immoral.
Yeah.
But my view on that is if only she had learned double entry bookkeeping. because what really ruined her was owing too much money and getting found out. So if she'd been more careful with her expenses,
Yeah.
she could have kept on having adultery, for a long time. That's what I think.
Yeah, we
so
gotta
let that be a lesson to you.
To all
Learn
of
math,
us.
it comes in handy.
To all of us. Next question. Oh, who has the mic? Oh, there's the mic. Yeah.
Hi. I wonder if both of you might be open to talking a little bit about your process, like writing as a practice, maybe impart some advice on those of us who are in much earlier phases of a writing career.
Claudia, do you have a process?
I'm your younger, so go on.
Well, you shouldn't keep rubbing that in. Oh, yes. I wish I had a process. I'm so old that I never went to creative writing school because there weren't any. And I didn't know that I was supposed to have a process. So I'm always at a bit of a loss. But if you want some encouragement, I will say this. Nobody sees what you put on the page. So don't be afraid of it. If you don't like it, you can always put it into the waste paper basket, and no one will be any the wiser. I think a lot of people think that there's somebody looking over their shoulder all the time, but there actually isn't. There isn't until you publish.
You hope.
Well, there is that. Yeah, I'm told that there are now programs that track your keystrokes on your computer.
Exactly.
Well, good luck to them. I hope they're enjoying. Yeah. And what about yours?
Well, I want people to have the ability to ask you questions.
Now,
so
Claudia,
find me after,
now,
and I will.
now, Claudia, she asked about both of us.
But I learned from my elders.
I don't think you learned much.
I learned enough. So next, who has the mic? Anyone? Right. Oh, okay. Up in the balcony.
Can you hear me? I don't know if
Yes.
the mic is working.
Yes.
So I heard a lot about Handmaid's Tale being a horrifying story happening in a sci-fi world. Being from Iran, it's happening right now.
Yes, I know.
And currently, Taliban in Afghanistan is preventing young girls from going to school. So there is a real Handmaid's Tale going on there.
And there was when I was writing it. So I understand this. And I can also tell you that the television series is in 128 countries and is quite carefully watched and read in these countries. And I know some people in these countries, and I know what problems they are facing and how they are dealing with it to the best of their ability.
So my question, we were talking about being optimistic. Let's say you're the writer. Maybe you can use your abilities to have a happy ending for the real Handmaid's Tale right now that is going on in Taliban.
I don't have a magic wand.
Oh, come on.
And my, do you know the word schlep? I have no schlep with the leadership of Iran. They have no reason to listen to me.
They won't.
No. So I have no magic wand.
So my question would be, what do you have to say to young women who are not allowed to go to school right now, which sounds really absurd, sitting here 2022 and being privileged to do everything, but at the same time, right now, this is happening. What do you have to say to Afghan girls who somehow might listen to your optimistic says?
There are people working quite hard on this problem, and I know some of them, and it is not going to be easy, but it is not that nobody is thinking about them. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, and it can't be solved just like that
Right.
at all. And most of these problems with long histories, which they do have, long histories, they're very difficult because, as you know from the United States, it's push forward, push back, push forward, push back. And all you can say about the United States is that public opinion has changed a lot since, let us say, 1950.
We hope.
I know.
I don't know if I
You
know.
weren't born.
I wasn't born. I wasn't born, but I have a mother. I know for Black people, the sense of being dehumanized hasn't lessened, even though there are economic advances, et cetera. The prisons are full of Black people.
I know.
The police are shooting with impunity. And now that they're being held accountable in specific high-profile cases, that means things are happening that are not making it to the news. So I think Black people are living with, Homi Bhabha uses the phrase, the risk to life is a risk to living, so that knowing that you could be killed, that no matter what you've achieved, where the progress is in the United States. you know and you negotiate the fact that the randomness of the kill can reach you no matter where you are.
It could reach you no matter where you are, and it is more likely to reach you if you're black. But it's also, I don't know whether you know that Paul Auster has just come out with this book called Bloodbath Nation.
Mm-hmm. I haven't read it.
Yeah, well, it's the culture of killing.
Guns in the United
And
States.
yes, and that kills all kinds of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
too.
but we have numbers.
I know you about the numbers, and I've seen the numbers, and you're right about that.
Yeah.
But it is not
Just.
just.
Yeah, it's not just. It's a culture of guns and
I
the
think
rise of white supremacy in the United States.
That is very scary.
Is very scary, very real, very tangible, and in the government, so promoted from the seats of highest power in the Supreme Court. So, yes, I don't. Yeah, we know. Who has the mic? I'm sorry, I have to do that. Somebody's controlling where the mic goes. Okay, there it is.
Good evening. It is a great pleasure to see you here tonight because I live about 30, 40 kilometers away from your home in Canada.
That's your neighbor.
It is lovely. May I
She's
also
over
say that there's nothing wrong with our age. I'm the same age. And there's nothing wrong with it.
I just need to say, I am hoping to get to your age. I'm not saying anything is wrong with your age.
But that's not really what I want to speak to you about. I actually come from East Berlin. I was born in East Berlin. So I found it very interesting with you saying, let me clarify, did you start writing your book, here in Berlin, or was the idea here before you came to Berlin about The Handmaid's Tale and East Berlin? I thought that was a very interesting thing. Thank you.
No, I had started thinking about it in 1981, just after Reagan came to power and we were getting the pushback. And I started thinking about it, but then I also thought this is too crazy for me to be writing, and I tried to write a different book, which went nowhere. So the message was, therefore, I had to write this one, and it was in West Berlin that I actually sat down to begin it on this German keyboard typewriter. In fact, Isolde Olbaum, who takes pictures of writers, has a picture of me sitting in West Berlin, mit die Deutsche Akademische Ausdienst, which was very active at that time, and even provided me with a German teacher, which I went, and she said, "You will hear this on the street, but don't say it. It is wrong." But I wanted to say things that I heard on the street. Anyway, so yes, I did start it here, but I had been thinking about it already.
So you didn't actually get the idea?
I didn't get the idea here, but when I was here, I visited East Berlin, I visited Czechoslovakia, and I also visited Poland at that time with the Canadian embassies in those places. Although East Berlin, I actually got on the S-Bahn and went to the Pergamon Museum. Of course, one has to do that. And that was very interesting because we had a child with us, and people wouldn't talk to us, grown-ups, but they were very nice to our child. The children were safe. You weren't going to get in political trouble for talking to a child.
We have time for a few more questions.
Hello.
Hello, yes, I see you.
Hello, Ms. Atwood. My name is Derek Scally. I'm based in Berlin. I'm a journalist for an Irish newspaper. You said this evening we all need to be vigilant at what's going on, and yet even at this event and everywhere you go in the world, everyone seems to turn to you as if you've become sort of a dystopian oracle or a Cassandra. Is it worrying for you? Is it flattering for you? Is it wearying for you that everyone comes to you and saying, Margaret, what's going to happen next? Do you wake up in the middle of the night saying, I don't have the answers? I mean, do you ever feel like the Wizard of Oz? You're just a woman behind a curtain, and if people knew. Is it good that we're all turning to you, or do you wish we would be more self-starting in our vigilance? Thank you.
Well, I think... Well, I'm always pretty clear that I'm not an oracle. I don't know the future because there isn't any the future. There are a number of possible futures, and which one we're going to get is going to be partly dependent on how we behave, and partly it's out of our control, because there's always surprises. Some volcano may blow up and, cause a global cooling, or you don't know those things. You can't know those things. And I'm very clear that I cannot know those things. But on the other hand, you can read the tea leaves about some things, and that's all it is. It's looking at possibilities, how human beings are likely to behave under certain circumstances, and the fact that. Well, the question with The Handmaid's Tale was, if the United States were to have a totalitarianism, under what slogan would it operate? And it wouldn't operate under, hi, my name is Bert, I'm a communist, follow me. They will never do that. But, hi, my name is Bert, and I've heard directly from God. That's more likely.
Yeah. Exactly, and you will not replace us would be the other.
Well, that is very creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. These people have not figured out much about mortality, have they? Somebody's going to replace them.
Well,
and
but
if
the
nobody,
idea,
I know what the idea is. Believe me, I know.
The idea is.
Yeah, we know what the idea is.
Procreate.
Like, this feels very surreal right now that I get to ask you this question. So I'm wondering where you see your role as a writer and as a public person in fighting the climate crisis.
So the question is?
Where you see your role in terms of climate change.
Well, I grew up with the biologists, and they were talking about this in the 1950s. Club of Rome came out with a paper in 1972 that said, if we keep acting this way, this is where we're going to be in 50 years. And we did keep acting that way, and here's where we are. But there's no such thing as no hope. We're doing a program this fall called Practical Utopias, which is online. And we are giving groups of people building blocks that we already know about. And if you want some hope, go to a website called Project Drawdown, which will tell you all of the things we are currently doing that, if we did them more, would lead to a drawdown of carbon from the atmosphere. So it would go the other way. So a lot of people are thinking about this, and there are a lot of new technologies and new ways of living that, if enough people did them, would cause the situation to reverse. So I've been thinking about this for a long time, and my parents were early conservationists from the generation that were thought to be kind of loony. So harmless eccentrics. But you needn't pay any attention to them. Our problem as a species is that we're very short-term thinkers. So how to change people's mode of living. So our idea with Practical Utopias is It has to be carbon negative or carbon neutral. It has to be scalable, that is cheap enough so people can do it, and it has to be attractive enough so people will wish to do it. So what kind of house are you going to live in? What are you going to eat? What are you going to wear? Clothing is important. Will it be made of mushrooms? Maybe. Will it be made of fibers grown from algae? That's in the cards. There are a lot of new things. For instance, somebody has invented a technology having to do with air conditioning. The heat in air is carried by the water vapor, and usually air conditioning removes that water vapor. It takes a lot of energy. This is a membrane that removes the water vapor before the rest of the air gets cooled. It cuts the energy consumption by 80%. Wow. So I'm very keyed into those kinds of things, and we're giving our participants these Lego blocks, so build your own utopia. You have to say where it's going to be, because something that's suitable for the Arctic is not going to work in a tropical rainforest. Mm-hmm. You don't need a parka under those circumstances. So geographically specific, how much sunlight do you have? How cold is it? How hot is it? Do you have a source of fresh water? Very important. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by practical. And just to give you the background, I did grow up in the woods for a lot of my childhood with no electricity and no running water. So I know how to do these things. Stick with me when the lights go off. If you go on Instagram, you can see me with my axe, chopping the kindling.
And your flamethrower.
No, the flamethrower, they took it back.
They took it back.
Wasn't mine, but the axe is.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Strike next week on Friday in Berlin, so please everybody go.
What's happening? The climate march? Yeah. Say that again.
Can you repeat that?
There's a climate strike next week on Friday in Berlin.
Friday. And
please everybody go.
What form will it take?
It's a protest on the street, and everybody is invited, all ages.
Is this the Greta Thunberg generation?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I'm familiar with it.
It's Fridays for Future.
There you go. So see, young people are interested.
Hello. Firstly, it's a great honor being able to stand in front of you and ask you a question. And I was kind of wondering, given the kind of fluctuating human rights on an international scale, and also the nature of censorship throughout the past and also the future, how future literary works would kind of look, how the future of literature, from your opinion, would kind of looking at the past and then kind of transferring it to the future.
Which part of the future?
Well, let's say this generation of writers, how their nonfiction and fiction, how that would look.
Okay, so here's my feeling about telling other writers what they're either going to do or ought to do. I don't do it. So they will do their thing. And I cannot imagine what their thing will be, because just sharing this with you, I'm gonna be dead. No, you're not. Yes, I am. Yeah, so that's for them to figure out. And it's going to be like any generation of writers. Some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be mediocre, and some of them are going to be horrible. And it's like that with everybody, but you can't tell them what to write. You can only comment on what they have written. So my feeling is let it rip, and we'll find out.
We'll find out. Or not. Or not.
Claudia will find out.
I might
You'll
be-
let me know.
I'll let you know. And our final question.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Claudia, Margaret, I'm a huge fan of both of you. And I loved that you spoke about how The Handmaid's Tale was something you began writing when you were in Berlin. Claudia, I know you're starting a residency at the American Academy soon. And I also know that, Margaret, you're Canadian. Claudia, I believe your family comes from the Caribbean. And I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of being able to navigate across borders in order to tell and evolve your storytelling, and then respond to the wave of restricting borders that we're now seeing that is sweeping across the West, and what impact do you think that will have on storytellers and writers?
So do you mean restricting immigration? Is that restricting borders?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's always been a thing. As soon as there were borders, but even when there were not countries but territories, there were always, this is mine, you can't come on to my thing, whatever it is. People have been doing that for a long time. But the thing about writing and books is that they travel. So sometimes you read books to see people who are like you, but you also read books to find out about people who aren't like you. Otherwise, I would never have read Moby Dick, not being a 19th century whaler or a whale. Yet. So I think we read for a huge number of different reasons. There isn't just one reason for reading books. I read a lot of murder mysteries. It's pure escapism, I admit to it. I'm not so keen on the bodice rippers. I find them too silly. But I'm up for a good murder any old day of the week. But you know, I read a lot of writers who are in no way like me in any way. And that expands my knowledge of what it is to be a human being, because all of these people are human beings. They're all part of the definition of what it is to be human. So that's, I think, the thing about border crossing, all kinds of border crossings. You are hearing about people who aren't like you. If it's a situation where there is nobody like you, that there are no books about people like you, that can feel very exclusionary. You feel I'm not included in this movable feast of literature. But I think that is increasingly not the case. So for instance, in Canada for years and years, there were no novels, poems, and plays by Indigenous people. There were oral traditions, but you didn't get to hear about those. Beginning in the 1980s, people started writing and publishing, and now there are a lot. So sometimes there are these vacancies that you think, why isn't there anything in this space? But then people come along, and there is something in that space. And I can remember quite early on being an early reviewer of Toni Morrison, just for instance. And sometimes you feel, well, the space was empty, but it wasn't really empty. It's like a spotlight on a stage. There are all these people in the wings. You don't see them because they're not in the spotlight yet. But then they step into the spotlight, and they were there all along, but now you can see them. So I think it's like that.
I would only take issue with they step in. I think they're let in.
They're let in.
They're let in. So, Margaret,
So, Claudia.
I want to thank
So
you.
tell us when you're doing your event.
I would if I knew. I think it's Saturday.
Okay. One of these days, she's doing it.
One of these days, I will be talking about Just Us, my latest book. But for now, I would like to say how honored I am to have been able to sit next to you for an hour and a half. I will remember this as I go forward, thinking about things I should have done. This will be one of the things that I got to do. So thank you so much.
And thank you so much. Oh, thank you.
Take a bow.